I did fear backlash and oh gosh, what will people say? Two things kept me going.
How do you become a globally recognised name in a competitive industry? Hi, I'm Anila Dami.
And I'm Rakesh Chauhan. Welcome to the Global Indian Creatives Podcast,
where you'll hear how household names have carved a path in their fields,
helped create the cultural narrative of British Asian Indians in society, and whose stories can inspire anyone with a dream.
Parle Patel is best known for his comedic sketches that capture his experiences as a British Asian Gujarati, earning him a loyal online following. Born in London, he rose to prominence through his YouTube channel Planet Parle. In 2015, he won Best Online Channel at the Asian Media Awards. His viral success paved the way for live theatre, where he starred as Mrs Kapoor in Mrs Kapoor's daughter's wedding, and launched his own show called Patel's Millions, featuring comedy, music and dance. From comedy and acting to presenting and producing across TV, radio, online platforms and theatre, Parle Patel shares his journey with us.
Parle, look, you're a British Indian comedian, performer, presenter and producer. Tell us about your journey.
Thanks, Rakesh. So I would say about 12 years ago, I started this crazy journey of being a creative, and it all pretty much started online. I think the whole world was going through what I refer to as the digital revolution, or you could certainly say that the UK, the US and Canada and most developed countries were beginning to see an emergence of anyone with a bit of a creative flair coming online and sharing that creativity. And I too was a part of that. So I started basically making content in the form of YouTube videos and Instagram videos on the internet. And I think by 2014, they started going viral, which let me build an audience, a social media audience, which then translated to getting opportunities to present television, radio, work my way into theatre and other forms of entertainment. That's how I sort of got started, you could say. But along with the social media content and the theatre, which is mainly comedy, I also produce music as well. I was, at the time when I started in probably about 2015, I was probably the only music producer of my type, you could say. Someone who is presenting and producing original Gujarati music from the UK. That's a little bit about me.
We want to get to the other side with the theatre and the writing, the music. But you did start at the very beginning, really, such a long time ago. How did you decide what your niche was then? Because obviously we know now people have their different categories like food, travel, fashion. Mm-hmm. How did you decide, right, this is what I'm going to do and build your audience from that?
I think I saw a gap really early on. So, I grew up at university watching so many other South Asians, so many other people of like an Indian background around the world making YouTube videos, especially in the form of comedy. So there was, Lily Singh, Just Rain, Zaid Ali, Hamza from the UK, who used to do his Diary of a Bellman series as well. So I saw a lot of other South Asians making content, but it was almost like I was watching content that was 70 to 80% relatable, that 20% was missing. And that's what inspired me to sort of represent Gujarati people and sort of show what that means when you're Asian in the UK. It was pretty much from day one I decided it's because I saw that gap and felt that, I'm not being represented entirely from these videos and the content that I'm seeing, and just generally the kind of flavor you would see in the UK when it comes to anything Asian. And that's a given, right? Being Indian is so vast. It's so broad. People in North India and South India can't even communicate with an indigenous language unless they've learnt one another's languages. North India speaks mainly Hindi and South speaks one of the Dravidian languages like Tamil or Malayalam or something like that. So that's how vast and diverse India is. And I love that. But I wanted to bring my flavor into it because I felt it wasn't shown or seen. And that's why from day one, I pretty much decided, yeah, I'm going to do this. And every now and then I'm like, oh, should I do more content in Hindi? Should I open it up? And I do that by making content in English. So non-Gujaratis can then sort of come into my world and sort of learn about Gujarati culture. But I've really enjoyed representing Gujarati culture, more so representing myself from it all.
You answered that so eloquently.
A nice way of putting it.
You've had your own BBC Asian Network show. You branched out. You presented on CBBC. You presented a BBC One documentary. And tying all this in together, how important do you think your cultural identity has been throughout all these different roles where you branched out?
I think everyone's cultural identity itself isn't important, but what our experiences are because we have a cultural identity is, if that makes sense. It's a little bit paradoxical. I think now there's a jumbo focus on everyone's cultural identity. But for me, it was more about my experiences and the nuances that happen. Because the thing is, like, you could be British and Punjabi and British and Gujarati and British and Tamil, but if we're all painting ourselves as Asian, then there's a lot of nuance that is missed. What a Tamil person might have culturally significant might be very different to the Punjabi or the Gujarati. So I think in that sense, it's been important. For me, it's been important because that's how I built my brand and identity. But I think now there's like this unhealthy obsession with identity. It's almost as if we started going, yeah, let's talk about, what makes us different and whatever. And now it's almost as if you can't escape that. This is obviously my personal experience. So I think the experiences and the stories and what your cultural identity has given you the opportunity to do or be a part of, that's important rather than the identity itself.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I suppose what you've kind of touched on there that I'm also interested in is the amount of people who are now sharing their identities or their voices and using social media as their platform to connect with the world. And obviously you've been doing it for such a long time, but do you find now that it is a really saturated place and maybe it's harder for you to have a voice on those platforms because there are so many voices on there?
I think, yeah, there is an element of saturation, but it comes back to sort of what I was saying earlier. Like, at the end of everything I'm doing, I've only really represented myself. My culture is secondary in the end because I could go on and on about all the things that are culturally significant to me, but someone else could have been British and Gujarati and grown up with something completely different still. So really, I've represented myself, who happens to be Gujarati, who happens to be Indian, who happens to be British, Asian, however you'd like to put it. But at the end of the day, if someone's from another town where there's no other Gujaratis and they've not been into Gujarati heritage or Gujarati cuisine or Gujarati clothing or Gujarati music, you can't really take away from the fact that they are still Gujarati. And I think even I had to learn that. And I sort of accepted that early on, that, being Gujarati isn't about being jumbo, super loud and extremely connected to your heritage. It could literally mean you're inspired by business acumen of the Gujarati community. It could be you're inspired by the moral values of the Gujarati community. There's so many different ways. So I think that's what I was getting at earlier. Like, yeah, there is definitely saturation. If you're focusing just on certain elements of the culture, there is. But if you're representing yourself, then your audience automatically connects with you as an individual. And then even if you're talking about things that aren't on brand, then they're still connecting. I run a lot of campaigns, or am a part of a lot of campaigns about health awareness that are particularly aimed at Asians. And a lot of the times, the companies that I work with are quite thrilled that my audience engage. And I've learned over the years, they probably engage because they've connected with me as a personality rather than just my content. And it's also meant that I've probably not grown as big as some of these influencers and digital creators who are on millions of subscribers and millions of followers. But I've focused on trying to build a bit more of a community where it might not be as big, but there's that connection with me as a person and vice versa.
And that's really important because you do have this dedicated online following. And on that, earlier we sort of spoke about how you've done a variety of different roles, and theatre is something which you've recently been doing as well. And a lot of people do come to see you because they're connected with you. And now, as a performer as well, with all these feathers in your caps, how does this new realm of theatre show compare with producing video content as you previously did?
I love this question because theatre is so different to digital content. It's a completely different art form. I've really enjoyed it, and I've been really grateful to all the directors that I've had a chance to work with. But essentially, what I've been doing is taking my online content to the stage and presenting it to a theatre audience, if that makes sense. It's almost like, when you listen to a song, you can listen to it live, or you can listen to a CD recording, MP3 or whatever, or you can watch a music video, and essentially each of them are different experiences. So I feel like the journey's been amazing. I've learned so much, and anyone that's, primarily been in theatre, I have such a high regard for them. Like, it's such a painstaking art form because it's so physical. It requires a lot of discipline. There's less room for mistake, but it's a lot of fun. And I'm really grateful to my audience and audiences from the theatre world that have sort of accepted me as well in that world. I would say that the future is I definitely want to do more theatre. And right now I'm producing videos because a lot of my online audience are like, oh my God, you're not making any videos. Like, what's wrong? What's happened? Which again is such an honor. Like, it's such a nice feeling to know that your audience really enjoy your online content. So I am making videos, lots and lots of them. Got like an entire season written of like new content, new things. But I am focusing on theatre in my spare time, and hopefully coming up with a show of my own. Hooray!
None of this is easy. I mean, breaking in to theatre from the online world is a really big leap. What are some of the challenges you've faced, and what advice would you give to anybody who not so much just focusing on going from online to theatre, but perhaps transitioning to another creative field that is perhaps an extension of themselves?
It is difficult, but I promise you, whoever's listening to this, you will be able to transfer your skills because it's all creativity. You just have to be determined to understand and accept that it's going to be different to what you've been doing. So theatre has been difficult for me, especially the last show that I did, Patel's Millions. I was working with people that had way more experience than I did in theatre, or they were trained actors. But in the end, I would say that I was fairly happy with my performance. I'm very self-critical. But what my advice would be is learn about whichever skill that you're going into or whatever world you're going into. So for me, I was going into theatre, so I spent a lot of time reading about theatre, researching, trying to figure out if I could take online workshops or in-person workshops. Ask lots of questions, be ready to be vulnerable. And if you're naive and you don't know, that's absolutely fine. I feel like I was really lucky because the other actors I were around incubated me so much. They gave me so much help in understanding. When I did Mrs Kapoor's daughter's wedding, that was a little bit different because that had much more of a sketch element. The script was much more adapted to what I already do online. So that one was easier for me. It just felt like, okay, we're just doing a video, but we're doing it on the stage now. Whereas Patel's Million was very much by the book. There was a script. It was quite strict and formal in many ways. So there is a difference, but learn about the platform that you're going into. And I think that's probably my only regret looking back. If I've ever had an opportunity, I've been so overwhelmed with all the other things that I'm doing. I've not had time to focus on that particular art form or that particular format that it might have let me down. Whereas now, if I get an opportunity, if I feel like it's different to what I do, I only take it on board if I have the capacity to learn more about that. That's my advice. Learn as much as you can about whatever it is that you want to go into if it's different from what you do. But essentially, it is all creativity. And if you're around a good team, then they will help you and guide you.
I just want to ask one final question, because obviously you do express yourself in a way that is true to you and your creativity. I mean, the whole dressing up, the lipstick on, the hairspray in.
I went lipstick shopping this week, actually. I was like, I need some summer tones.
Yeah.
We don't have much of a summer in the UK, so I was like, how am I going to brighten up the videos?
That's amazing. Did you fear any backlash when you decided you wanted to start doing that? What was that process personally like for you?
You know what? I did fear backlash and oh gosh, what will people say? You know, two things kept me going. Firstly, or three, you could say. Firstly, I didn't have that much judgment, if I'm honest with you. There's a lot of people who make content on the internet, and when I see them trolled, it breaks my heart. Because I've not had that much trolling, just being honest. Either people don't say it and they say it behind my back, or I don't come across it. I do every now and then, but it's not overwhelmingly unbearable. I've seen and heard of friends and other people in the industry be trolled, and it's so sad. But what's amazing is how they've learned to deal with it and how they've learned to fight it and how they've learned to rise above it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is my fear was secondary to my aim and objective, and that was I want to represent culture and I want to be like the people that I look up to. So I looked up to people like Eddie Murphy, Robbie Williams, you know, just some of these great, crazy comedians who'd done crazy things, Jim Carrey. Even in the world of South Asian artists, Johnny Lever, actors and comedians who were so ridiculously unafraid to just do wacky, crazy, flamboyant things to entertain. So in my head, I'm like, well, I don't really care what you think. If these people that I look up to have done these things, then that's who I want to be like. I don't really, you know, I'm not too concerned about your opinion. Unless someone was giving me an intellectual breakdown of why what I'm doing is wrong and them arguing with me with some sense of intelligence, I didn't really value the negativity because it wasn't ever constructive. If I was getting feedback saying, you know, you shouldn't have done this or you shouldn't have done that, or you've limited yourself by saying this, that would bug me because then I would be like, oh goodness, this person is actually intelligent and they have a point. And then I would have to learn to, you know, take that criticism and the feedback and be like, okay, cool. The next video I do, or the next bit of content, or the next song I release, or the next show I do, I'll bear that in mind. But if it was just someone trolling, like, oh, look, boy dressed as lady. And it's like, in my head, I'm like, we've been doing this for thousands of years. And the people that I look up to have entertained the world by doing these things.
And that's such an incredible answer, because with this sort of publication, what we do want to do is inspire other people, and we want role models and people, emerging creators as well, to have people to look up to and get advice from.
You know, just you use the word role models, and I think for me, even I had digital role models as well. So like, okay, Lily Singh, she was dressing up as her dad, she was dressing up as her mum, she was dressing up as the boy next door, she was doing the multiple character type thing. So I did mention people from like the world of cinema and stage comedy doing these sort of things, but it was happening in the digital world as well. So it's not like I came along and I was like the first person to do this. I will say that in the South Asian world of comedy, there was more females and female comedians and creatives who were doing these things, where they were doing the gender switching and they were doing the multiple character, and they were way more liberal with their comedic stroke when it came to who they were becoming and what they were doing. And I suppose what's really interesting is my flagship character that I do, the Gujarati mother, Kokila Ben. I really was inspired by those other South Asian digital creatives that were female. I sort of made her like this really strong, bold, loud, you know, opinionated character, which is what I've grown up around. That's like a little bit of insight of like, you know, how I even came up with that character. And I mean, that's been one of the biggest parts of my success. So I owe it all to being brought up by strong women and by also seeing women as well. I really want that sort of noticed if anyone's watching this, because I did just say people like, you know, Eddie Murphy and Jim Carrey. Yeah, they 100% inspired me. But like I said, if it wasn't for people like Lily, then I wouldn't have really been doing what I'm doing.
What a nuanced and thought-provoking interview, diving into many fascinating topics. We hope you enjoyed listening, and we're thankful to Parle Patel for joining us on the Global Indian Creatives Podcast, an interview series celebrating Indian creatives who have contributed to Britain and beyond.
Our thanks also go to the Queen's Commonwealth Trust, who are championing our purpose to inspire the next generation of creatives. And thank you for tuning in.
In our next episode, actress Nina Wadia takes us through her remarkable journey, from her childhood across continents and her early passion for dance, to her illustrious career on screen in shows which include EastEnders, Goodness Gracious Me, and Strictly Come Dancing.